Commissioners. Here in the conference room, we have Vice Chair Commissioner Dick Scouten, Commissioner Pam Treese, Commissioner Jerry Willey, and we're hoping that Commissioner Rogers will join us eventually.
Yes, I have not heard from Commissioner Rogers this morning.
Okay, and he's
Should
not
be
on
here
Zoom.
just customary 15 minutes after we normally start.
Okie dokie. All right, so the first item on the agenda is board and leadership communications. Who would like to go first?
I will. I have nothing to report. And
You had a successful vacation, we
I had a
hope.
very nice vacation. Thank you very much. And I'm ready to go back to work.
Excellent. Welcome back.
Good. Well, a couple of things. I met with Pam Levitt. She, among other clients, she's one of those political consultants, lobbyist folks. One of her clients is the YMCA, and we're working with them on a child care center. We had made a significant contribution towards doing that. There was a $5 million earmark. I'm just going to use that word. I like it myself. A $5 million earmark on the state lottery funds. Unfortunately, because of the drop in the lottery collections, that project is not going to be funded at this point, but lots of people are going to be working very hard to make sure that that gets, that it's at the top of the potential projects for the next round of lottery dollars. So there's going to be some delay, and I just wanted the board to be aware of that. I can anticipate that Pam Levitt will be talking to the chair, other members of the committee, of our board, and Pam as well, of course. This facility is very close to our boundary lines there in very easterly part of Beaverton. I will be attending the Council for Forest Trust Land Counties meeting. Apparently the first time I've met in some 6 months or something like that. That will be this coming Friday, and that's what I got.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Willey?
I don't have anything to report.
Okie dokie. I'll start with an item that a couple of items that Commissioner Willey and I share in common activity. On Friday, we participated in the final candidate interviews for the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer position. There were 3 candidates. The committee came to a recommendation. As you know, this will be a position that reports to our new CAO, and she participated in the interviews as well. And so they're moving apace. But we had very qualified candidates. There were over 100 people who applied. Another, I can't remember the exact statistic, but around 75 went through the minimum qualifications, then a large number went through the first screening, then over 10 went through the first phone interview. Then there was the panel interviews on Thursday, and which had our staff as well as external folks, and then our final interview on Friday. So,
Was it a difficult decision?
I think we'll be able to answer that better after we have someone who's accepted the offer.
Okay. Great.
We were pleased with the suite of finalists.
That's really what I'm asking. Thank you.
Yes. Last Wednesday night, CPO 15 had a big crowd, and I really want to give hats off to our community engagement team. They pulled together the expert resources from DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality from the state, from the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, DOGAMI, all of this as well as here in our own agency with land use and transportation as well as solid waste, because there were great concerns over the West Side Rock Quarry that is being remediated. And I'm really glad I attended because I had the opportunity to learn about the change of ownership and the concerns about improper fill that's present on the site, and the concerns that the community has about their quality of drinking water, given that they're dependent upon the groundwater table. So the meeting was really well done, I think, well run. Let's see, yesterday had a chair mayor's meeting really focused on COVID update, as well as going over the activities that we are well versed in, what's on our plate. Then last week, as you know, on Monday evening, the 3 counties at all levels of our public health ecosystem, as well as up to the county chair, submitted a letter to the Oregon Health Authority as well as to the governor, enumerating many different areas where we could use assistance from particularly OHA in order to meet the challenge of this coronavirus. There was a category on system improvements, another category on communication, and then some various other ones. That all culminated in a meeting, very productive meeting last night with OHA, the director of OHA, Pat Allen, as well as many on his team, and identifying the work team to come to closure on the various items. Some items they already had in place, other ones we need to have some further discussion. For example, on criteria that would more closely help with the nature of this COVID virus here in our 3-county area versus in other parts of the state. Everyone is committed to ensuring that our public health is strong and that we're responsive to our community needs. So really, really good meeting. The weekly regional solutions meeting last Friday focused on education. There are new metrics due by the 14th for schools. There's also some final information from early learning. I always get that name wrong, the Early Learning Division. And as we know, that's for childcare and our preschoolers. So that's all coming, and I think in a way that will help answer a lot of different questions, and to the degree that we can get some more certainty for our providers, move forward with that. Then lastly, yesterday, the AOC Legislative Committee met and just finalized some items that were of potential consideration in the one-day short session of yesterday, as well as identifying items for subsequent follow-up for the session in 2021, which, given the nature of all we're continuing to go through with COVID, somewhat feels far away, but it's only about 5 months away, so it'll be here before we know it. Then lastly, from me, I just want to make sure that you know, we've got the listening sessions coming up. We'll be talking more about those today. And back in April, I had to postpone the State of the County address due to the nature of COVID, and we found a way to put that forward in a really useful manner. So we're going to take advantage of the 5th Tuesday of September, We don't have a meeting that day, Tuesday, September 29th, and we're going to have a State of the County that is going to be much like the style of our first ever virtual town hall. So I'm looking forward to that. We'll be talking, obviously, about COVID and economic recovery, a lot of what we've been focused on. But we do have quite a few accomplishments since last year. We have a course for what's before us through the remainder of this year and onward through the end of this fiscal year. So a lot of good stuff. So welcome, Commissioner Rogers. Is there anything you have to share with your colleagues?
I guess I can share a couple of things. Jerry, you need to get the traffic fixed out here on, oh man, 20 minutes to get through town. Last Wednesday, Pam, you were on vacation, and so you missed the meeting at WSI with Diane. They mentioned specifically that you had worked out some arrangements to coordinate with them on some hiring, which they were very appreciative of. Listened again yesterday to the new STEP updates. I don't know how many times I'm going to hear that presentation, but I guess enough. The only other thing is that you probably saw the Tualatin Chamber also came out asking for a change in the November ballot measure on transportation. They're asking it be deferred along with PBA and a lot of others. So it's a very interesting time for all of us. I'm sure you're all hearing it. I am from a lot of folks. It's something I didn't anticipate, especially when I tell them I'm in support of it. They like to educate me a little bit, and I think I'm educated enough. It's going to be a challenge at best. So I guess we just need to be prepared for that. But that's about it.
I didn't have the smarts to put together a list of things that, I got the mic on. Okay, yeah. There's a light there and everything, it's on. One other thing, I will be presiding over and opening up the first meeting of a series of meetings on the Tualatin Valley Trail project. It's a look at the best bike routes and trails that we can put together with county coordinating with other agencies in and around the Loa and West Beaverton area. And I was slightly amused by, it's true that it was a short session yesterday, but I can tell you that my spouse left early yesterday morning and didn't get home until around midnight last night. So it was a short session, but a very, very long day.
Yep, I think they were successful in focusing on the budget rebalancing, their key mission for that special session. So we'll look forward to a full summary of that from our government relations team. All righty, leadership communication. Mr. Rhodes.
I have nothing for this morning.
Don?
The
Welcome back from vacation.
Yes, thank you very much. I had a short vacation over in Bend. The ballot measures for the charter amendments have passed their ballot title challenge period, so we'll be submitting those.
Diane.
My little thing buzzes. Yeah. So Clean Water Services continues to be in stable operations. We have no new COVID cases, and the team's doing really well right now. We're getting the order in for the BRCs on Wednesday for the 3-ply masks and the cloth masks, so those should go out later in the week. It'll go out to the business recovery centers, so that's the first group. There's a whole series of masks going out to the agricultural community that the team is also working on. It's distributing the EOC's inventory, so it's working really well.
BRCs have been working on putting together an application online for all 4 of the BRCs. Thanks to Diane, they've got 145,000 masks coming. And there's a second order for cloth masks and children's masks, and so that's, I'm hoping, not more than a couple weeks out. They're all coming tomorrow as well? That's great. So, yeah, the BRCs are going to be well equipped, and they're already ready to take that out to the public by the end of this week. So it's going to be a fun time for that.
So I have a policy question related to that, because it isn't clear to me the responsibility that the state has for providing the response for the EOCs across all the counties, particularly as the state coordinates needs for school districts, for hospitals, and so forth. And so I certainly don't want us having to take the brunt of any financial burden for all of a sudden families across Washington County expecting that we're going to have the bandwidth to offer everyone masks, including for every school district, every family that has children in the school district, as well as daycares and businesses and so forth. So I just have the policy question of where does this start and where does it end? That's all. And I don't know if that's, I thought we had we have an update from Jack on the CARES Act, and maybe this all goes through that, but I haven't seen, I just have a question in terms of what is the policy there, and do we need to take any action on that? That's all.
Well, I think the business group has been very focused on providing PPE for small businesses specifically, and that's the application is going to be have some specifics on it so that it's defined as to who qualifies and who doesn't. We have had conversations of specifically designating PPE for childcare. But we're kind of waiting on the childcare group to show direction and give us some direction along those lines. But our role has been specifically on businesses. And I think Diane's been talking to others outside of that realm, but I'll let her speak to that if there's anything else going on there.
I think with our role as the county board of commissioners and with public health, we need to make sure that we've got a clear policy on that.
Sure, we can talk about that. It's right now the KN95 masks that come through the EOC is being distributed to the agricultural community and the food banks. So we've been utilizing what could come through the EOC. There are items that were applied to the EOC, but they were denied because they didn't have the ability to release 3-ply masks or other types of items.
So what has been shared with me through our CAO is that our EOC was using a pull model where folks would contact the EOC and say, we need. And now through your proactive steps, you're moving to a push model. And I just want to make sure that we have, I don't want the EOC and staff feeling like they're being pulled in different directions. And so to the degree that I'm hoping there is a clear policy statement, I'm asking that that be shared with us. That's all, because there seems to be a model change. That's all. And I want to make sure that as I receive questions from folks that I know what our direction is. So we can get to that when we're down in the CARES Act too. That's fine. Okay, so we'll hold that for item 5 later on the agenda. Next, we'll move on to item 2 on the agenda, Public Safety Legislative Update and Board Listening Session. This is we're having some interesting audio effects today. Are we all set audio-wise? Okay. So this is through the course of the next topics. This is going to be a team effort here. On Zoom, we have Jagjit Nagra joining us as well. And Elizabeth Mazara Myers is here. And we actually have a presentation for this topic, though I can't see it on the screen yet. There we go. Okay, why don't we go to the next slide?
Okay, thank you. And Jajit, I don't see you up here, but I see you there, so you're here, yes?
Yes, he is
Great.
here.
Okay.
He doesn't get projected here.
Okay, all right, great.
By week, it's only on these monitors.
All right, great. So for the record, Elizabeth Mazara Myers here is Chief of Staff for Chair Harrington. On Zoom, we have Jajit Nagra, Government Relations Manager, Portfolio of Public Safety. We're here today for, as the chair said, not all Jajit and I, but this morning you'll have a three-part basically presentation that will provide some context for some of the public safety issues that have been happening, how that led to the listening sessions, some work that Commissioner Treese and the chair did with what is now called Reimagine Oregon, and then a presentation from myself and Lamar Wise for a fund called Reimagine Safety that's grown out of the Reimagine Oregon project. So that's sort of the layout for this morning. We'll start with the public safety and listening session presentation. The goal here is to provide, like I said, an update on public safety reform legislation. Jajit will be taking that. And then to provide background, excuse me for the spelling, background on an update about the community listening sessions. So I'll turn it over to Jajit.
Good morning. Next slide, please. Chair Harrington, Commissioners, for the record, my name is Jagjit Nagar, Government Relations Manager for Washington County. Good to see you all. So what I want to do is I want to provide a very high-level overview of recent public safety reform and transparency legislation that was passed during the, not July, but June 26th special session. This was the first special session of 2020 called by the governor. Moreover, I want to give you a sense of where we are now in terms of state policy and reform efforts related to public safety. And then finally, I want to try to give you my best educated guess as to where we would be headed in the future. There's a lot happening right now in sort of the ecosystem of public safety, right? We have national efforts, we have local efforts, we have efforts at the state level. But where this is culminating is really around a couple of items: long-standing systemic racism when it comes to public safety policies and disparate impact on vulnerable communities and communities of color. So this is sort of the foundational basis, right? The DE&I work that we're doing at the county is also intertwined with this because it'll provide a lens for the public safety policies that we engage with moving forward. So I don't want you to think about this as sort of a vacuum of just public safety. In my mind, this is really a mirror or reflection of the time of larger social issues that we're grappling with as a society. So the POC caucus is somewhere I want to start. This is the People of Color Caucus at the state level. There's a bit of confusion around the POC caucus driving a lot of this public safety reform efforts. Although a number of the members are certainly progressive leaders when it comes to public safety reform efforts, really the POC caucus is focusing their efforts in the short term, as I just spoke to Janelle Bynum about this, Representative Bynum. They're focusing their efforts on internal efforts at the state level to create transparency for staff of color, protections, eliminating retaliation, reporting requirements, and you're seeing this with things like the legislative equity officer. So that's really their focus, but a number of those members of that caucus are very motivated when it comes to public safety. One of the co-chairs of the People of Color Caucus is Representative Janelle Bynum, who I just mentioned. She is also the chair of the Judiciary Committee. Representative Solomon, Janine Solomon, who's one of our Washington County legislators, is the chair of the Public Safety Committee. Both of these two have, in my mind, a strong desire to reform our public safety system. So that kind of gives us a bit of the lay of the land. The other thing to keep in mind is that from both the House side and the Senate side, in a bipartisan sense, both sets of leadership have indicated that the 6 bills that were passed in the June 26th special session, the first special session, were merely a starting point, a departure point. Even though, yes, it's a lot to have 6 public safety bills come at you, this was really the the foundational steps to create or reimagine systemic change at a foundational level. So at the outset, I want to go back to June 26th when 6 bills were passed and very quickly go through those bills. House Bill 40, and just to give you a reminder of sort of the policy items that we were grappling with, ranging from use of force to transparency to personnel and HR issues. So very quickly, House Bill 4203, this was the Chokehold Bill. This bill, banned chokeholds except when deadly use of force is justified. I want you to keep this bill in the back of your pocket because at 9:42 p.m. last night, the Senate adopted a bill, 4301, that actually amended and modified this particular bill. Expanded it, really, is what it did. And we'll get to that later when we start talking about looking ahead. Again, circling back to the 2020 first special session and the 6 bills therein. House Bill 4205. This requires police officers or reserve officers to intervene to stop or prevent another officer engaged in misconduct unless the officer cannot engage safely. Moreover, it also provides that officers must report misconduct, and it provides retaliation protections for the reporting officer. House Bill 4207, this focuses on the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, DPSST, to create a statewide database that tracks suspensions, revocations, and revocations of certificates. So what they're trying to do with this is prevent a law enforcement officer leaving one jurisdiction and simply going to another one within the same state, despite them being engaged in non-savory activities at the previous place of employment. House Bill 4208. This prohibits law enforcement from using tear gas for purposes of crowd control, except in circumstances constituting a riot. And so, we in Washington County have not been experiencing the amount of engagement protests that we're seeing in Portland. And this is really sort of playing out right in front of us in terms of when a law enforcement agency declares something a riot and then they use this force. The other thing that this bill did is that it made a requirement the law enforcement agency provide adequate warning and time for dispersal of the particular crowd at issue before using tear gas. One thing of note, this bill, when it was first drafted, also included things like LRADs, which are long-range acoustical devices. In the last hour, that was let go of the bill, and I would imagine that when we talk about these law enforcement tools, we're talking about tear gas, LRADs, things like that, other uses of force like that. I would imagine that we're going to see more bills coming our way in this context. Senate Bill 1604. This makes it much difficult for police agencies who discipline an officer to then have that discipline overturned by arbitration. This was a contentious bill, but I think fairly significant. If we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. Now, that's 5 of the bills. House Bill 4201 is what I'm considering the 6th because this was the formation of a committee. It established a joint committee on transparent policing and use of force reform, So this committee, ahead of the special session yesterday, actually advanced about 11 or 12 legislative concepts, specifically specifically around public safety. 2 to 3 of those LCs actually made it into a bill. There was much consternation on the Senate side of only doing budgetary matters yesterday, but House leadership felt that the public safety matters were so important that at least one bill needed to make it across the finish line. And so from House Bill 4201, the joint committee that I just referenced, they essentially formed a work group, diverse stakeholders, law enforcement leadership, community leadership, and they really discussed a whole host of issues ranging from riot control tools, uniform and vehicles, meaning the labeling of uniforms. There's been a lot of complaints about just people wearing a generic police badge and not being able to identify which particular branch of law enforcement the deputy or whoever they may be is actually emanating from, reporting of misconduct, once again, use of force. So what we're seeing here is that they're adding nuance to the 5 or 6 bills that were passed in the special session, but they're also looking at a much larger subset of issues to grapple with. And so 4301, like I said, 4203 was the chokehold bill from the previous special session in June. 4301 passed the House and the Senate late last night. And what this bill does is that it adds corrections officers to the ban on using chokeholds. And in terms of the way that the language is written, this actually does apply both to our community corrections and our juvenile departments. However, both our juvenile and our community corrections departments do not train on chokeholds, so this will very likely not be an issue for us at all. Additionally, it adds nuance in terms of requiring the police officer to give a verbal warning and reasonable opportunity to comply before using deadly force, if reasonable opportunity exists, and also requires the police officer to consider alternatives to physical force or deadly physical force if reasonable opportunities exist. And so, again, what's happening here is they're sort of nuancing the policy, really getting to the heart of the matter, and focusing on a lot of legislative concepts that, quite frankly, have been discussed about for years, but now they're sort of coming to a culmination because the political will, the POC caucus, other groups, other stakeholders have the will to push it across the finish line. And so one of the things I've been talking to the governor's office about in terms of reforming public safety, in terms of ensuring that we continue to get adequate state funding for the important county functions that we do, such as our juvenile program and our community corrections program. One of the things that was bluntly told to me is that we simply cannot think about public safety the same way that we used to. And I think this ethos, this sort of thematic policy trajectory is really what's shaping a number of the bills that are coming our way. And so, I think that we're going to continue to see more bills nuancing use of force, really looking at how dollars are spent in the public safety ecosystem, why those dollars are spent the way that they spend, and maybe they should be, reshuffled to another area like health and human services or social services, something to that extent. I think we will continue to see the remaining 7 or 8 legislative concepts that the Joint Committee offered up for this special session. I think we're going to continue to see those refined and turned into bills as we move forward. That, I would say, is probably the most up-to-date information that I have in relation to public safety reform and policies and legislation. And so with that, I'll take any questions. I know that was a lot of content.
And I think there's one more slide, Judge.
Can I ask a question on this slide? And I don't
Yes.
know if other commissioners have any questions on anything that you've mentioned to date. The bill that created this Joint Committee on Transparent Policing and Use of Form, was it 4210 or 4201?
01.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions on anything thus far? Okay, let's keep going.
And so, in terms of what's next, we have heard that there could be another special session in August or September. It is likely that public safety legislation will again be introduced during that time. It is very likely that we will be seeing new public safety legislation introduced during the long session. So the moral of the story is that there's more to come. And we've been fortunate because our county council, members of our county council, have actually been involved in shaping a lot of these policies, working with Rob Bovet at AOC, the Sheriff's Association, the Chiefs Association. And so it's nice to see this coming together of the various stakeholders, and it's great that Washington County has a seat at the table.
One of the things, oh, sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
I have a question for you, Judgy. This is Pam. What is your sense of the reaction, the public reaction, to the scope of these bills? So in other words, do you feel confident that within your stakeholder group, you have the voice of the public concern there?
That's a really great question. I feel that most advocacy groups would still feel as though that their concerns maybe aren't being raised to the level that they would like to see have happen. And I think this is manifested in efforts like the Reimagine Oregon conversation that we're going to be getting to later. I really think what you're seeing is sort of this outside-in approach where the communities are saying, no, we're going to own it. This is what we want to talk about. And policymakers, this is what you need to do, rather than sort of us policymakers making decisions in rooms and trying to best fit a particular policy to a group or a community that maybe we don't know as much about as we'd like to. So my thinking is that what we're going to see is more community input, more community oversight, specifically over the public safety sectors, or at least a push to create that oversight with a strong link to the community and the public at large. So I think we're headed in that direction. I don't know if I can confidently say that every single community group is feeling as though their concerns and their needs are being heard. What I can say is that certainly a larger group of folks are being heard more than ever in terms of public safety policy and their concerns, their needs, representing their community. But I think we're working towards that end to have everybody's thoughts included.
I have a follow-up question to that, and that is, what is your sense of the reaction statewide to this? I mean, I think it has the potential to be perceived as a metropolitan issue in the Portland area and maybe the Eugene area. What are your thoughts there?
Well, as you're kind of pointing to, in more rural parts of our state, the leadership there is reticent to engage in a lot of these policy reform discussions. I've heard policymakers or stakeholders even talk about how we literally have almost no people of color in our jurisdiction, so why should we have to comply with X, Y, or Z? And, I think that those comments are made, but I don't think they're overly persuasive anymore. Because even if you don't have, say, a particular population threshold in terms of the BIPOC community or whatever it is, adhering to that policy and upholding that policy, I think makes our state in general stronger and more equitable. And I think the policymakers at the top of the decision-making food chain, if you will, know that and are very sensitive to that. And so I'm not so sure that I just think that there's such a strong push. There's such a groundswell to embrace these policies that even our more rural counterparts and people who may be more conservative on these issues are leaning into it more than prior.
Great,
If I could add.
Maybe it's a follow-up question. What was the vote on that bill last night? I thought it was a pretty widely supported, bipartisan across the state.
Absolutely. 4301 had strong bipartisan support. The major concerns were just like every other bill that was introduced yesterday. There wasn't enough time for public input. The thing, though, with 4301 is that there were 2 weeks of public input because 4301 was a combination of 2 or 3 legislative concepts that came out of the joint committee that we just discussed. So you're right, Commissioner Scouten, there was tremendous bipartisan support, and I think we'll continue to see that.
I think there were only, 2 negative votes for that or something like that? 2 or 3 negative votes out of the entire House, for example.
That's right. And we had, I think, 55 yeas in the House.
Elizabeth, did you have something you wanted to add?
It's okay.
Any other commissioner comments, questions? I have a couple. On your response on community sentiment and expectations, I know that we've been hearing from constituents quite a bit subsequent to our budget conversations and our body-worn camera direction. And we're going to hear more through the listening session, and I know you're going to get to that in a moment. And we've used the phrase community input, but what I hear a lot of, particularly through the Reimagine Oregon work, is that folks are looking for more than just an advisory committee where input is sought. Instead, they're looking for additional responsibility and, more importantly, accountability. which tends to move towards the word oversight. So I think we're going to have some more conversation about this over the course of time. Jagjit, when you were talking earlier about conversations with folks down in Salem in the state, you talked about how we can't think about public safety the way we used to, and we've certainly ourselves been considering community need and the need for social service funding, and it's a journey. We're working on that. I am a bit concerned, though, that that folks may see this, as we have seen in a large degree, the emails that we've gotten about defunding the police and support social services. That presumes that it's an either or. And my particular concern is a lot of the programs that community corrections and juvenile justice implements are in fact social services, providing the needs for job skills, for addiction treatment, and so forth that people need in order to be successful in life. But because that programming is in the community corrections part of the budget or juvenile justice part of the budget, that it can be perceived as bad. So I think this is where we have to come in through all of our interactions over the next year plus to help ensure that we bring the public along about the good work that is being done so that we don't fall victim to this false choice. So I just wanted to share that. Especially as over the last 2 years, we have tried to ensure that the state is providing cost coverage with the actual cost study. And we seem to be getting further and further behind in that regard. Lastly, before we move on, with regard to the conversation about our counterparts all across the state, we're really going to have to take a look at our presence at the AOC Public Safety Steering Committee. And this is difficult because with me as the only full-time member of the board, it's hard for my 4 colleagues to participate actively in this AOC work. But it isn't the same to have our government relations folks at the table. So this just underscores why we advanced the charter change that we did. While Jagjit is right on point that I'll say resisting this or not comprehending the shift in this domain is not pervasive, or excuse me, that the arguments being made are not persuasive. Sorry, read the wrong word on my paper. Nonetheless, the few outliers are still very loud. We've been experiencing that with our meetings with Governor Brown on COVID. And so that's where having our presence at the AOC Public Safety Steering Committee is really important. So we're going to have to figure that out so that our interests are represented, so leading up and through the 2021 legislative session. Because here in Washington County, I think we have a good, strong story to tell. So more to come on that. Okay, let's keep going. Oh.
Just one comment to just follow up Commissioner Teresa's question. I think if I have a concern, Jagjit, it would be that there hasn't been enough vetting of this legislative action so we can go through it. This is game-changing stuff, as you have indicated, and I just want to make sure we get it right. And what probably concerns me more is all the new bills that are going to be coming to modify the old bills. And so the old bill the ink hasn't even dried yet. And then they're putting more stuff on it. And I don't want to refer to it as a pork barrel, but it certainly has all the inclination that, we're going to continue to add more legislative action, more bills, and then we're going to have a conglomerate mess that would probably require somebody to step back and say, okay, now we got to pull all this stuff together and really make sure that it's designed the way we intended it to be designed and the outcomes are what we wanted. And so that's my only concern when we do these special sessions and we start passing all of these bills. And quite frankly, I understand the reason why we moved away from it's supposed to be only for budget items and we moved into the public safety. I understand that, but again, I would certainly, I appreciate you being in there, and I just want to be kept abreast of all of the activity that's going on and make sure that we do vet all of these publicly and make sure that when we get to the finish line, it's what we intended.
If I could on this
You're absolutely
point,
right, Commissioner.
sorry, and apologies, Jajit. Without seeing you, it's hard to make eye contact. This is actually something Jajit and I have talked about. There's actually, on several of these bills, there's long legislative history. Several of these bills have come before the House or the Senate variously over the years. And I think one of the things that Jajit and I can work on is as we get closer to legislative session and know what's moving forward, is to have a bit of a compendium of some of that legislative history so you can see sort of who's vetted what and how it's come along without creating an encyclopedia of it. So I think there is some opportunity there to provide some of that historical context for you.
And
And Commissioner Willie, oh, sorry, Commissioner Scott.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm sorry, that there was some discussion about this last night that I caught, and I don't pretend to be an expert here in this area at this point, but some of the changes that occurred in our use of force are simply a reflection of long overdue statutory changes that had never taken place at the state level, even though there have been U.S. Supreme Court decisions about some of them, which basically some of the legislation was simply just meeting with U.S. Supreme Court law changes that have occurred 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. So it's not revolutionary from my thinking.
And Madam Chair, if I may just tack on to that, I totally agree. And our office, Elmer Dickens particularly, helped write the testimony for the Oregon State Sheriff's Association that supported this bill and basically said just what Dick said just now.
Could we get a copy of that testimony?
Sure, I'll send it to you right now.
Commissioner Treese, did you have something to add?
I do have another question. Judgy, do you see a presence during these special sessions of other commissioners from other jurisdictions?
There really hasn't been a lot of time for that. There has been some written in testimony, but really not a lot of oral public testimony the way that you would normally consider it taking place during a short or a long session.
Okay, thank you. I'm just asking, again, following up on the chair's comment about participation at AOC. We've talked around this table as well about participation in the legislature. So I was really clarifying that.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we're not done yet with this presentation, so I think we need to move on.
One comment I have. We like to talk about being one Oregon, but I have an occasion, just from the work I do, plus just being around to talk to people throughout the state, and I can tell you that the divide between those east of the mountains and us is becoming more acute. That's why 17 counties want to join Idaho. I don't think they're going to get that opportunity. I think it does say that we need to be very sensitive about their feelings. We have different issues simply because we're more cosmopolitan, we're a little larger, but I'm hoping we're going to continue to engage and not simply roll people, but just simply by our votes. There is a mood out there that it's not particularly pretty, and I know I've tried my best, and I'm sure everybody around this table has too, to say that we are stronger as a unified state than a divided state. and that we need to understand that we may have different needs, but they can be supportive of those needs. And they need to understand that we're sensitive to hearing their voice, because that's not always the case.
Well, and
Well,
Commissioners Rogers, I
think if I could speak to that, Commissioner, and I know that my fellow commissioners who were at the last AOC convention and annual convention, as well as what I see through active involvement with AOC, is we have been focusing more on what we have in common as opposed to what divides us, because focusing on what divides us does only serves to further divide. So I think we would be best to focus on where we have commonality. I think we need to keep moving on.
I'm just keeping an eye on my time, so there's some things I'm just gonna truncate here, but I want to provide you some background on the listening sessions. And I'll weave in some of the conversation we had with Tajit just now. So back on May 25th was the videotaped death of George Floyd. Not long after that, this board provided a public statement on that death. In response and in an effort to, I think, reflect the mood of what was happening here in Washington County and nationally, the chair proposed to fully fund the body-worn cameras for Sheriff's Patrol deputies. A reminder that there was partial funding of that at, I believe, 16%, and she wanted to simply complete the funding of that over, I believe it was a 4 or 5 year process. It was just a day later, or maybe actually that same afternoon, that we very quickly heard from individuals and organizations with concerns about that proposal. The chair met with the Council on American and Islamic Relations on the 11th. I know that there was also other conversations, again, with individuals and organizations over those couple of days. I think that one stands out because it was the first one of those many conversations. So please don't think that was the only one. In fact, the very next day was when their invitation was, well, when we attended the first invite to what was then called the protest response meeting. This is Black leaders from throughout the region who, in response to the protests, which were in response to the death of George Floyd, were now seeking long-term commitment from electeds. This included everyone from Senator Ron Wyden and Senator Jeff Merkley to the governor on down to state, local, and regional electeds. Over the course of those, I believe it was 5 meetings, Tajit and I staffed the chair and and Commissioner Treese. I think what's really important about this, and we'll talk more, the chair and Commissioner Treese will talk more about Reimagine Oregon briefly, is what the chair has already stated. This was not an opportunity for electeds to come before this body and tell them what they've already done. It was not an opportunity to share their thoughts and prayers. This was an expectation that there would be policy commitments to a variety of items that were laid out by this group, and where you did not feel like you could either make that commitment or could not provide a timeline, that you would record that. And so it was what I would like to call holding the feet to the fire, and they were very serious about this, and it was a very intentional process. I was looking through my emails to try to find where we went from having a town hall to having listening sessions, and I could find June 16th as the first time where it was clear we were going to take what was going to be an August virtual town hall and convert them over into a series of listening sessions. Since June 16th, I've been working as a project manager very closely with Amanda from Community Engagement, who's been a terrific partner in developing an RFP. We went out, brought on a consultant team who's going to be helping us facilitate these. Because of this time frame, I want to remind you, the board gave direction to come back to you by the end of September so you can make a decision about funding or not those body-worn cameras. That date is set on your calendar for September 22nd. So in an effort to move quickly, the first listening session will be, and I have the schedule here in a minute, but it will be next Monday, August 17. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more. Thank you. Next slide. So there will be 6, I think I said 4, sorry, that's the next one. There's 6 culturally specific, there's a lot of meetings we're doing. 6 culturally specific meetings during which a facilitator will help the Board of Commissioners hear from our community members about whatever's on their mind right now. Commissioner Treese, to your point, the goal here is to engage the community in what their needs are. To get ready for this, we have, or not we, community engagement for the team has sent out a one-question survey to say, what's on your mind, and here's a list. And we've gotten great responses, and my apologies. I didn't print out this morning's information, but right after I will share with you, we've gotten about 150 or so responses, and I will share with you the breakout of sort of what folks are thinking about. It's been sent in English and in Spanish. I'm not sure if Marcus was able to join us, but Marcus Monday and his team from the Racial Equity Collaboration are going to be helping us with facilitation because yes, thank you. These meetings, as you know, will be publicly noticed and recorded. And we're going to be asking you to sign up simply so that we know where you are. The format for these I will get you a run of show later this week as we get closer to launching. But there will be an opportunity for the facilitator to present the information, sort of welcome folks, pose the question about body-worn cameras, and then we are fairly certain that we'll be breaking up into what do they call them? Rooms, breakout rooms, thank you, where folks who are interested in different areas can have their conversations with smaller groups. So just like we were in a regular room, you break up to your table, and then we come back and share. The one common item will be, that's okay. The one common item will be body-worn cameras, which will happen at the beginning of the conversation, and then we'll loop back at the end to see if, given their breakout groups, if they have additional things they want to add so that we can give you good feedback on that. Here is the schedule for the listening sessions. I think that what is important about this schedule and how we've broken it up is this is us working to live DEI work. So it's not just a lens, it's how we actually do things. It's an activity, right? This is an ongoing effort. And so while we will have 2 community-wide meetings, one on Monday, August 17th, and one on Saturday, August 29th, the other meetings, we're asking folks from the Latinx community, the LGBTQ community, the BIPOC community, and people with disabilities to join us. While anyone from the community is welcome to join any of those meetings, we're asking that folks who identify in those meetings are given the opportunity to speak. I think it's important that as community members who are not, I'll speak for myself as someone who does not fit into any of these communities, that it's my responsibility to hear what those folks have to say, and we're going to do our best to create a safe place for that to happen. 2 more notes on that. I'll be working logistics with each of you, whether you want to be here or at home or whatever. We'll make sure you're connected. The chair will be here in the boardroom, which will allow us to have an ASL, American Sign Language interpreter, with her in the room. That will also then free up so that we have a live Spanish interpreter simulcasting during each of these meetings. I know that was awfully quick, but I am trying to stay on time, and I know that I'll be sending you follow-up information on this. So there we go.
So we have 2 other topics that work off of what we've talked about thus far. We've got one on Reimagine Oregon and another one on reimagining public safety. But we want to checkpoint at this stage and see if there are any questions, particularly around the listening sessions.
I have it's not a question, it's more of a comment that I remember distinctly sitting in that chair across the room and asking what we were going to do in relationship to the issues that we were hearing. There had been protests peaceful protests in Washington County, and I want to express my appreciation for the work that you've done because it looks very comprehensive. I appreciate your work, Elizabeth, Amanda's work. This is exactly what we need to be doing, in my estimation, in terms of opening to the community to help us understand what our needs are.
Thank you.
I agree, thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question, just for clarification purposes, did I hear you say that at this August 17th meeting, that's where we're going to begin the conversation of body-worn cameras?
Yeah, so within each meeting, it'll be the same format. So the facilitator will welcome folks and we'll begin with some of this context of why we're here today, right, which is to talk about body-worn cameras. Pose that question, facilitate a conversation. From there, they'll move into breakout groups. And again, I am so sorry I did not print this out, so Amanda maybe can remind me, but I think we had 7 other options of things that, what are your interests? And I think the plan is that at the beginning of the meeting, before people join, they'll have a chance to answer a poll, that same polling question. We'll pick the top 3, and that will then be the breakout sessions. Oh, and she pulled it up for me. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I didn't have this in front of me.
And that's going to be consistent with every one of the lists.
Every single one will have that same format.
Thank you for that. I didn't
Okay,
catch that
yes.
first.
And what we're finding is, just quickly, the other issues we asked about, or the polling we did, was community needs, public safety, policing and sheriff's office, county budget, racial justice and racial equity, the direction of the county, transportation and traffic, affordable housing and homelessness, economic development, and other. And what we find, this was in the English survey, the 3 top in the English survey right now are in the numerical order: affordable housing and homelessness, followed very closely by racial justice and racial equity, followed very closely by public safety and policing. And then oh, great, thank you. Thank you. In the Spanish survey, we had the same questions, and the top 2 were affordable housing and homelessness and racial justice and racial equity. So again, when we say community listening session, we really are wanting the community to lead what we're even talking about. But everybody's going to have to talk about the body-worn cameras because we want to be able to provide. And if what we find is that people don't want to talk about it, that's feedback as well, right? So I think
You're going to provide us with that information before this Monday?
yeah, so probably by Thursday or Friday, you'll have a sort of a comprehensive memo from me that lays out all of the data we have so far, what the run-of-show looks like, how to sign up for each one, et cetera. So look for that shortly. It's pretty much done, but we're waiting. We wanted to make sure the facilitators were on board so that we're all agreeing on the process.
Commissioner Rogers?
Yeah, the question I had, and I understand these are listening and not us participating particularly, but it was no secret I had reservations about the cameras. I stated that during the meetings. I still have them based upon perspective. So will there be some context from legal folks or from the sheriff's office, or are they simply listening? Because there are a lot of legal issues and a lot of sheriff issues that would hopefully be discussed at some point, not by us, but by somebody with expertise, so the context of the meeting can be that people fully understand all of the issues, not just a perspective issue.
So thank you for that question, Commissioner Rogers. For these series of sessions, this is a board-driven community listening session. And so the goal for this is to simply pose the questions and hear from the community. I know that the sheriff's office and the DA are each engaging with the public in different ways. And I'm sure they're going to be getting their feedback as well. And I would then encourage them to provide that feedback to the board if there's additional concerns.
Yep. And as you may recall, the sheriff was very supportive of the proposal for body-worn cameras. And this is the listening session series, and we will, as a board, be coming back to the body-worn cameras topic in future board meetings, and we always have the opportunity to bring in our county council, the sheriff, and/or the district attorney for additional conversation with us.
And, pardon me.
No, go ahead.
And again, I'm trying to watch the time here, but on September 22nd, we have scheduled both time for the report and time for you to have a vote that evening. It is, of course, at the pleasure of the board to decide to hold that vote back for whatever reason, if you feel like there's more information. And per usual, you'll have the report in advance of that meeting. And so if there's other people you'd like to have testify, I'd encourage you to either coordinate with the county clerk or myself to help make sure everyone is there to provide whatever input you feel like you need.
What went into defining the date for September 22nd?
That's the last Tuesday of the month, September 29th. There is no board meeting. And so
Yeah, but between August 31st and September 22nd, there are multiple weeks in there.
because after that last meeting, we have to prepare a report. And so with 6 different meetings, I want the facilitators to have time to get a draft, move it through staff. We have a deadline of the 15th, and then prepare the presentation, which then has to be in by that Friday, so.
I think the expectation that we're going to have a board work session on this topic the same day as a final decision is a bit of a stretch, perhaps. So, well, the board will need to digest that.
We would have the opportunity to move the actual vote, though, to maybe.
Yeah, but if it's published through the agenda. That's why I think board members need to be thinking about that now and need to provide some input with regard to that scheduling. Because the date currently accommodates staff need for providing the report. We need to have the opportunity to look at the scheduling from the standpoint of our decision-making. So I'm asking you to all think about that, and we'll have to move accordingly.
And I will say County Administrator Rhodes did offer at one point whether you wanted to have a special meeting on the 29th to make that decision, and I didn't feel like that was my place to add that into your calendars.
So we're going to need to move on because we have two other deep and related topics. So we've got the overview today and the listening session. We heard you're going to be following up.
Chair, can I ask you one
We
quick question?
heard you're going to be following up with some follow-up information to the board.
And on the listening sessions, we don't have to be concerned about three of us being on there at the same time,
No,
do
they're
we?
publicly noticed.
Okay, and so we're going to be okay with that? And
Yes.
if I understood the email that came out yesterday or something, that we're trying to make sure that we have at least one commissioner to every one of those, and as many
I'll
as
be
we
there.
can. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay, we need to move on to the next topic, which is getting back to the large scope, and that is Reimagine Oregon. So to kick it off, if we could go to the second slide, the third slide. Sorry, they're not numbered. So as Elizabeth talked about, there was, following the violent death of George Floyd, there was a group of Black leaders here in our area that got together and convened, June 12th. It seems so long ago, but it wasn't that long ago. I'd completely forgotten that until you reminded us, Elizabeth, protest response meeting. So Commissioner Treese and I were invited to participate in this Reimagine Oregon process. As Elizabeth noted, this included leadership at the federal level, and after Senator Merkley and Wyden were present at the first meeting, they had their staff attending in the subsequent meetings. The governor participated and her staff as well, and then elected leaders from the state legislature, and also commissioners from our three area county commissions. So as you see here enumerated on the slide, their goal was to figure out a system that would help end systemic racism. They did, I think, a very good job of ensuring that all the participants were versed in Oregon's history and how there has been progress, but I think there was a lot of insistence that we need to be moving forward, galvanized from the moment that we are all in as a community and really be making concrete steps. So if you go to the next slide, please. Here are the various folks that were invited to the table and that participated in a short series of meetings. There were 5 different meetings, and the group used tools to help gather information from each of these jurisdictions and to enumerate out how you were going to de-invest and how you were going to invest. So what you have in your packet is the press release from Reimagine Oregon, which does a really good job of enumerating what they were intending to provide. It's in the electronic packet versus in the...
So could I, and you, I just want to also put in here that I believe that anybody had the option as an elected leader to participate. I don't,
No,
was it?
it was by invitation only.
Okay. But then secondarily, we did get the Reimagine Oregon press release that you sent out, and we had that communication along the way.
Yep.
So, and I attended, I believe, only 2, maybe 3 of those 5 meetings. They were on Fridays, and they conflicted with the hiring of our CAO.
CAO.
There were a number of different issues. So I just want to lay a little bit more landscape out there.
And that's where we were really fortunate to have support through Elizabeth and Jagjit, specifically through the course of these meetings, because there were discussions in between meetings and gathering of information. And both Elizabeth and Jagjit did an incredible job of providing the information about what we've already had in our plans. Now, keep in mind, this was at the same time that we were going through our budget adoption on body-worn cameras and recognizing, given the mix of feedback from our historically disadvantaged community members, perhaps before we start spending those dollars out on body-worn cameras, we should take a pause and checkpoint with our community about the use of body-worn cameras, make sure we have a successful implementation for the benefit of all. So we were moving forward and laying out our listening sessions, right? We have had a program for effectuating our equity resolution. So we have a lot of really good stuff already in the works. And so that's where you see in the spreadsheets that are in our packet that our staff did a really good job of making clear how we as an agency, not just for public safety, but across our whole organization, we're doing things to help our community. And so that's what in the packet we've tried to ensure you have available to you. So next slide, if we could. So through the course of Reimagine Oregon, a couple of things have been followed through on. And Elizabeth, I think I'm going to need you, and I don't know if Jagjit is still on the line. Some things that have gone on. So there was the violent death of George Floyd, which has galvanized a lot of people throughout every community. I mean, we've had peaceful protests here in all of our districts in Washington County. So this isn't just a Portland thing. Thank goodness we haven't had riots here in Washington County that have destroyed property and impacted people. But a lot has happened over the last 2.5 months. Those peaceful protests, this effort that is now launched as Reimagine Oregon, and also the governor's office has put in place a racial justice council, and the e-board has effectuated dollars as well. But I'm afraid I'm not going to do those details justice, so that's why I wanted to turn it over to Elizabeth and Jagjit to make sure that that overview is correct.
Yeah, thank you. Chair Harrington, again, Elizabeth Mazara Myers, Chief of Staff to the Chair. There are 2 different pieces moved forward at the state level. One is the Racial Equity Council being chaired by Shannon Singleton out of the governor's office. In addition, there is a Black Fund. It is not the Black Resilience Fund. That is a different project. And I'm sorry, the name is just on the tip of my tongue. And during the last legislative e-board is when money, $65 million, was set aside to do that longer-term work. One thing, if I could just take a moment, I think it's important for us to acknowledge that while as legislators, as elected officials, and as staff who work for you, it's critical that we show up at these meetings and share the work that's being done, as well as listening. But I also want to acknowledge our staff of color who attend these meetings, or who staff or do work for us, who are re-traumatized when they have to see these videos or have to share an opinion based on what it is to be a person of color. And I just want to acknowledge that that's difficult work that's happening. And I'm grateful to have support of so many staff of color.
Commissioner Treese, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, thank you.
Okay. So I believe that I sent or we have available to us Governor Brown's announcement for the Racial Justice Council on July 31st. And there are a number of folks involved with that are familiar names for us, including Casey Jama, who's done quite a bit of work. He's with Unite Oregon. He's done work here in Washington County. Lamar Weiss, Marcus Mundy, Michelle DePass, we know from the Portland School Board, Nikenge Harmon Johnson at the state level, many familiar names doing this work. So we've got some really, I think, powerful people working on behalf of bringing more voice from our community in this important work. So we wanted to make sure that we put the full context of Reimagine Oregon at a high level, and then could bring it back home to the Washington County level. So out of this work with Reimagine Oregon was the realization that there needs to be further research and engagement work done here at the local level. That's being done through a proposal called Reimagine Safety that we have a guest speaker that will be coming in with our next topic. Bringing it back to our listening sessions and how we are engaging with our community to hear about their thoughts and concerns. Then later in October, we'll have another round of engagement with our community investment conversations. Last year, we knew those as budget listening session. So we're continuing with our engagement and capacity building here. And then all of this work there's a thread through all of this work and making sure we continue to operate as a fully collaborative agency. So we're coordinating all of this while we're also onboarding our new county administrative officer, a new chief equity and inclusion officer, as well as the Reimagine Oregon work that continues. So various moving parts, I think all focused on how do we do a better job of serving our community. We also have the sheriff will be coming back to us in September as he is launching an advisory committee. He'll also be coming back to us once he has secured the consultant to do the review of use of force. So we'll be having more conversation about public safety and its different parts, not just with the jail and law enforcement patrol from the sheriff's office, but also community corrections, juvenile justice, and the whole umbrella here for Washington County. On the ongoing engagement with Reimagine Oregon, as I mentioned, we've tried to make sure that they're informed about the good work we're already doing. And so I think as long as we continue to follow through on the work that we've set out for ourselves, I think our community will be very pleased with that work. So it's not like we're trying to add to it, but just ensure that more people are engaged and have the benefit of knowing of it. Next slide. Whew. What's next is really just the overview of what I just said. Sorry, I forgot to say next slide, please. Any questions before we do the next dive down on Reimagine Safety? Did I miss anything at the high level, Commissioner Treese?
No, I'm just kind of thinking about what happened in those Zoom meetings. And I was just reflecting on the fact that we were participants, and yet you have to remember the context of what was going on during that time. And we had in Portland, there was the chief of police changeover during that time. There were so many things happening that we were right on the edge of, but not as responsible for, let's just put it that way. And it was interesting to be able to be in a position to provide support for other commissioners, for other elected officials, while at the same time working to recognize what our needs are here. So I think it was a very eye-opening experience for me.
If I could add just
These
one
two.
thing, I think that also what was extraordinary about it was each of the electeds attending. So while the governor had staff on the call, she was on every single one of the calls. You know, Senator Merkley attended one or two, Senator Wyden attended several. Just very unusual to see electeds not just send staff. And I think, to be honest, I don't think Reimagine Oregon really gave us that option. So either we engaged fully or not. And I think because of that, it has stronger legs under it.
Well, I think my frustration in reading this is that I am way, way behind. And there's a lot of information in this that, quite frankly, I don't understand. So I'm going to need to ask some staff to invest some time in walking me through, especially the invest part of it, the schedules at the bottom of the slide that weren't on the screen here, because I have no idea, and the print is way too small anyway on my screen.
Are we talking about this one here?
Yes.
Okay.
But I guess I just wish that we would have been, we being the other three commissioners, would have been kept apprised of this process that was going on, the conversations that was had, so that I'm not going to spend the next several days and staff time trying to catch up to where everybody else already is. And that's my frustration on this. There's several things in here that I do not understand, so I'm going to have to catch up.
Well, I think the good news is that you're perhaps not as far behind as it may feel. I think the one important thing to spend time reading is the press release from Reimagine Oregon, because that really lays out the story of this galvanizing moment. All of the notes information in the spreadsheet is an articulation of the work that is already being done by the agency. So in that regard, it's the follow through of the policy and investment direction we've already authorized. And, for example, the behavioral health resources for COVID-19, all of the outreach and support that this agency is doing for our historically disadvantaged communities on COVID-19 is all part of this as well. So, so that's where, as I've reported out in our meetings about, there was another Reimagine Safety, and we're just reflecting what it is we're already doing, is what is documented here. But no problem at all. We have opportunity to come back to this, certainly in future work sessions. No problem at all. We did want to make sure that we provided the overview of how there are these major pieces that have now taken shape, pieces meaning efforts. So Reimagine Oregon and Reimagining Safety and our own county-wide response with our listening sessions and moving forward. So it's all coming together in a way that we hadn't previously. We were on a path for increasing our community engagement and implementing our equity resolution. And what I think we can all be very proud of is the fact that the work that we're already doing helps tell a very positive story as this theme of ensuring that public safety is community serving. So we're not having to do much different at all, but rather ensure that the community has the benefit of knowing. But it's a very fair observation that up until now, as commissioners, you haven't had to spend really time getting familiar with Reimagine Oregon. But it is something that more people in our community are starting to become aware of because they finally launched it on July 31st. So this was our opportunity to get this before the commission. So.
Well, and I with all that being said, I am hopeful that in the future that there are regular updates on these decisions and these conversations so that we can all be a part of that conversation.
There actually aren't any decisions that have been made, just to reinforce that.
I'll chime in too. I agree with Commissioner Willey's comments. I think that's appropriate. When I first looked at this, having no knowledge of it, I said, oh boy, a program which we're already fiscally constrained this year and what's this going to cost, and not that the intent's not good and not that we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that we weren't a part of that process. So I concur that. And then I would make one, and I don't mean this to be snarky, but just one comment about Reimagine Oregon. We just had a conversation about, there's a lot of the rest of the state that doesn't feel like they're really involved. And we call this Reimagine Oregon, and that all of this was 3 counties in the city of Portland. I would hope that maybe the work, which looks like good work, might be more broadly distributed so that we have folks in other counties, especially the Lanes and the Yamhills and the more metro counties that might also engage in this kind of work, because I think it's good work.
So if I might, Commissioner Rogers, so I would like to, one, make some clarifying remarks. So Reimagine Oregon was not convened by us. It was an organization that was created out of a group of Black leaders that were responding to the protests. If you look at slide number 4, jurisdictions, you'll see that there were folks from the state level engaged as well as our federal delegation. So one, I just want to, I understand that you may want to have seen other folks invited, but in the end it was their initiative, and so they invited folks that they felt needed to be at the table. I will say that the other efforts that have been happening at the state level have involved other players because they're different parts of different organizations that are moving things forward. I do want to clarify that there has been, the only commitments that have been made by the county per the direction of Chair Harrington and Treese are the ones you see on slide number 5, which is that we're going to continue our work with the listening sessions, continue to the community investment conversations. I made the commitment that I would make sure that our new CAO and CEIO met the leadership from Reimagine Oregon, and that we'll continue to engage with them moving forward. So there hasn't been a commitment of any kind of financial resources. And Commissioner Willey, to your point about this very thick piece of paper with lots of small writing, this the questions were posed by Reimagine Oregon. I worked with Administrator Rhodes and department directors to get this filled in over the course of some very quick days. But this piece of information will actually be feeding into, or actually has already fed into, a larger effort that Administrator Rhodes is doing with Alex to provide a county-wide look at all the various policies and programs that support DEI work that are already in process. So while this might be a first look at this very small type, this will be coming back to you in different formats over the next, I assume, weeks and months as the new CEIO comes on board. But I'm happy to also take the lead in helping you ensure that if there's, particular programs you want to find out more about, that we can get staff to chat with you.
I'd just like somebody to walk me through that schedule because, like I said, it's too fine print here. Can't read it here. So if you could get me a copy of that.
Absolutely. Sure, happy to do it.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're now going to go from that large viewpoint and aspect into a further, more local lens, and it's Reimagine Safety. We have an outside guest speaker, Lamar Weiss, who will be presenting this proposal, and we thank you, Lamar, for joining us and coming and engaging with our full county commission. So to advance through the slides, we just have to say, next slide, please.
Great. So Lamar, good to see you remotely. Elizabeth Mazara Myers, again, Chief of Staff to the Chair. I'm here to introduce Lamar Wise, who is a member of Reimagine Oregon and who has taken the lead on Reimagine Safety. I would also like to note that he was one of the founding and directing members of Rose City Justice, who organized the early protests and has been for many weeks in talks with the City of Portland and other folks to try to find ways to invest dollars in effective social services and programs. Lamar, it's yours.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. And thank you all for having me. It's awesome to be here. Again, my name is Lamar Wise. I use him, his pronouns. Just so that you know who I am, I live in Hillsborough, lived here the vast majority of my life. I live with my family and actually went to elementary, middle, and high school here, graduated from Century High School, went to Eugene to go to school at the U of O, so SCO Ducks. I don't know if anyone here's a duck, but
Sure, Teresa.
Go Beavs.
Yep.
yeah, go Beavs. Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. I came back and I worked for the Oregon Student Association. I was their legislative director and then executive director. Now I'm actually the political coordinator for AFSCME, which is the third largest labor union here in the state. And so, and do a lot of work in the community. So work with the ACLU. I'm on their board as well as a Partnership for Safety and Justice. And so issues of public safety are extremely important to me because as the statistics show, Black and brown bodies get destroyed at a higher rate than any of our counterparts through the public safety system. And so my involvement in Reimagine Safety really came through helping to organize a lot of the peaceful protests, both in Portland, and I also participated in a couple in Washington County. I'm happy to say that like a lot of the folks who we've engaged have continued to be a part of finding solutions, getting in touch with decision makers, and trying to find the best way to contextualize like where we're at right now, which is we're at a turning point where we can really see some change in terms of meeting the needs of the communities that we serve. And so I'm just here to do my best to represent that and to represent some of the asks that have come out of this work and out of the protests. So yeah, we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so just for some context, and I believe we've talked about this a little bit earlier, but Reimagine Safety, first and foremost, is a Black-led, Black-centered focused effort to ensure that we are looking at our systems, looking at what is needed in order to ensure that our social services are being funded, and that that we are creating a system that folks don't necessarily have to go to the police first and foremost, right? Like our police have a lot of responsibilities and do a lot in terms of just juggling all of the hats that they have to wear, right? Like, for example, when we have someone that is in a middle of a mental health crisis, or we have someone in the middle of a homelessness crisis, what is effective is not always the police being the first responders. Sometimes there needs to be different models, right? Like AFSCME actually represents 911 dispatchers. And something that we hear from our dispatchers over and over again is that they wish that there were additional services that were also open 24 hours, just like the police, so that they can actually send those services to the scene. But the things that are available 24/7 are, of course, police, fire, and an ambulance. And so this is a moment in which we are really trying to rethink what are the services we can provide to de-escalate situations and to actually meet the needs of the community. You can go to the next slide. So here are just like some of our high-level goals at this point for Reimagine Safety. The first is to engage Oregon's Black community as leaders in this effort. The next is to educate and engage Oregonians to share information and source potential models. Next is to surface, examine, and develop promising or proven pilots, policies, or practices when it comes to law enforcement. And then, of course, advance policies, proposals, or for local jurisdictions and state lawmakers to consider over the course of the next few years. And so we actually just started to engage a consultant that will help to lead us through this work. I will say that we are in it for the long haul, which I hope you all are as well. I will say that at this point, we are at the beginning stages of designing like what all of this could look like, and but of course taking it seriously, right? Like we know that nothing can change overnight. We know that it takes a lot of conversations and a lot of education as well with community members to even let folks know what is possible. And one of the reasons why we actually named this effort Reimagine is because we know that we've been doing the same thing for so long, especially just like talking from someone from the Black community. We felt like we needed time and space to rethink, reimagine, and to have deeper conversations with our leaders and folks in the community. And so that's where this is coming from. In terms of next steps, ongoing outreach to the public, private philanthropic sector. We've engaged them to raise additional dollars. At this point, or actually, I wonder, could you actually go to the next slide? Yeah, and so we actually have a few commitments so far. So we have 50,000 per year from Metro that they have already committed to. We have 40,000 from the private sector so far, and then 5,000 from nonprofits. So far, under consideration is the state of Oregon. So there may be a third special session. We don't know yet. I think a lot of that depends on what happens with Congress and the federal dollars that they may or may not make available to state and local jurisdictions. But we'll continue to engage the state. Multnomah County and Clackamas County are also a part of this. There have also been calls for us to engage Lane County, and so we've been starting to think through that and what that could look like. But at this point, actually, Clackamas County is going through a very similar set of conversations that you all are as well. They just hired a diversity, equity, inclusion officer, and we're actually, I'm actually speaking with the council about the commission in Clackamas County about this next Tuesday. And so, and then I think Multnomah is close to getting there as well, but we're still in conversations. At this point, we are also engaging philanthropy in a bigger way and trying our best to leverage actually the any dollars we get from local jurisdictions to match what's coming in from philanthropy. You all may have seen that my Memorial Trust is dedicating a $25 million fund to also help leverage dollars for Black-led, Black-centered efforts. And so we're really trying to use all that we can to hit our fundraising goal for Reimagine Safety. Generally speaking, we're trying to fundraise about $2.5 million. And these dollars would help to focus in on education of the Black community and just like Oregonians in general about the mechanics of public safety and what is possible, and making sure that folks are familiar with the system that we have. From there, we'll be doing a ton of research, right? A ton of research as to the different models, what would work for us locally, knowing that we are that we have unique needs, as well as legal expertise. We'll be seeking legal expertise, and then continue to communicate and include the different jurisdictions that we've already engaged. I will say that that Washington County has been coming through in terms of communication and being available and being there. Elizabeth and Chair Harrington have been awesome to work with on this effort, and have really, quite frankly, been pushing a lot of the other jurisdictions to respond as well. And so that's been super helpful in terms of just making sure that we do have local leaders that are working on this. But yeah, I just again want to thank you all for the time, and I thank you all for your questions. I believe a couple. I'm sorry, I can't see all your names because the screen is so big, but or the screen is small. But I will say that I do accept the feedback that we need to engage more jurisdictions and more folks. Like, I think you're completely right, actually, and something that has been brought up and that we're actually talking about later today with the other Black leaders. So thank you for the feedback. We'll take that in and actually do the work to do some more outreach there. And then, as well as another comment that was said, as folks catch up to kind of what's been going on, please know that I'm available, right? Like, I'm a kid of Washington County, and happy to partner with you all on this, and to make sure that we do it right. So, in that you all feel like you have the information and the things that you need to feel good about decisions and be successful. So, just know that that I'm here, and yeah, happy to be a part of this effort with you all.
So Lamar, this is Catherine. To kick off questions, a couple of things. Can we go back to slide number 3? The one that's titled Reimagine Safety, which they all are. There you go. And then, so that you have the benefit of knowing who's in the room, because we're more than just the portraits that are on the website. Could we just go around the room and introduce ourselves and let you know what district they are elected from to make these countywide decisions. Commissioner Treese, could you start?
Sure. Hi, Lamar Pam Treese. I am the commissioner from District 2, which includes a little bit of Beaverton, a little bit of Hillsborough, Bethany, and the border of this district is right against Multnomah County. So, and it's the district that has the largest proportion of unincorporated Washington County.
You also have Helvetia. in
Yes,
your district,
Helvetia,
too.
yes.
Hi, Lamar. My name is Dick Scout, and I'm on the county board representing the Aloha, Beaverton, and Cooper Mountain area, the ABC district. And I just want to note, too, as I'm meeting you, that you're certainly bringing some credentials. You're the political coordinator for the ASME Labor Council 75, so you're not just, coming from nowhere to speak to us. And I know that the Northwest Health Foundation is going to be housing this proposed safety fund, and again, that's a respected foundation. So, I'm seeing credibility here, and I appreciate that. I just want to comment too that we, as a community, as a region, we need to move forward and push the issues forward, or they'll be defined by other people. We're under national scrutiny. We're being played as part of a campaign effort. And I'm going to age myself here a little bit. 2020 is feeling a lot like 1968. And I was 16 then, but I can remember that time period. This is one of those years. And a lot of people were played in 1968. We want to make sure that we as a community are being constructive, doing good things, and don't get into a situation where terms like Bolsheviks and fascistic stuff and other nonsense is thrown out and becomes a game and a play. So I think whatever we decide to do, we need to be doing work that's constructive and positive, and I like what I've heard so far, and thank you for helping the organizer or one of the organizers for this program. Thank you.
Just going around the table, this is Catherine Harrington, elected chair of the Washington County Board of Commissioners. I first met Lamar when I was a Metro counselor and doing work around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and working for a better workforce, a better community as well. So it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to learn from you. I knew you lived in Hillsborough, but I didn't know of your historic Hillsborough roots. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. And I look forward to learning more and for the assistance in bettering my skills to serve our collective community. Commissioner Rogers.
Good morning. My name is Roy Rogers. I represent the southeastern quadrant. Most of my district is in cities, about 80% of the population, and you would know them as Sherwood, Tualatin, Tigard, maybe King City, Durham. And then I represent Jerry has the largest part, but a lot of my area is rural as it goes out into the rural areas of to our west. I do appreciate the work. I will have some specific questions of you in a bit.
Of course.
Hi, Lamar. Jerry Willie, County Commissioner for District 4, which is basically Cornelius Pass West. So I touch 6 cities, but mostly all of the rural. Once we get beyond the urban growth boundary and heading west, all the rural, clear to touching 4 other counties as well. So a good portion of mine geographically is rural Washington County, but it includes Century High School. So you're one of mine.
Yeah. Commissioner, were you the mayor of Hillsborough at one point?
Yes, I was mayor for 8 years at City of Hillsborough.
Awesome. Okay, so you're actually one of the reasons why I got involved in politics, because you came to one of my classes or one of our programs. So Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for following up, and I'm glad I made a good positive presentation to one person of that group anyway.
One
It's
way
all
to
your fault. Just so that it's all
Okay.
your fault.
I'll accept that responsibility.
Great, so opening it up to questions, I just wanted to come back to this slide because it enumerates what Reimagine Safety is all about and the goals that they've laid out for themselves. And one of the things that really struck me in this proposal is just as I had the benefit of being grounded in data from the Leading with Race study here in Washington County, is having the opportunity for all of us to be grounded in research. Research from the standpoint of what our community experience is, and also taking the good research that our public safety experts have had to meet the goals that we've laid out for them, right? We've heard a lot over the last 2.5 months about how our officers are responding in the way that we have trained them to respond, right? So it isn't that we have bad people, but maybe we have to look at what we've trained them to do, what we've asked them to do. And so this part of what the goal of this is to look at the needs of our community with our public safety experts as well, to look at what are our needs now here in the 21st century, being informed by our past history, but really looking out into the future. So that's what I find really most promising and engaging in helping us do our work as a Washington County agency.
Would it be appropriate for me to just make one comment? Just thinking back on what Jajit said about some legislators and some of their comments about, sort of who they represent. I think what's really important about this work, and this is a personal perspective, is that while it's Black-centered and Black-led, the policy advancement that they're looking to do is to benefit the whole community. And I think any of us can agree, and Lamar, thank you for your example, that 911, at 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning, maybe there needs to be other social services available besides just police, fire, and ambulance. And what that looks like for folks who are having mental health crises or homeless or whatever it might be, having drug and addiction issues. So I think that, again, while this is Black-led and Black-centered, I think that the community at large will benefit from the work being done here.
Commissioner, questions?
comment.
Today was the introduction of this. Go ahead, Commissioner Rogers.
I just, a couple of comments. One, I particularly like, and then I'll get to my question in a minute. I particularly like where you said there's a need for space and time to reimagine. Tearing down and beating up things don't really accomplish anything. I mean, what accomplishes is dialogue, and so the space and time, I like that. That's particularly a good point. In regard to it, at least in the materials we have, I'm not sure it's the same that you have, but it's talking about black deaths and black lead, and it's throughout the document. Several years ago in Washington County, we have a zero tolerance on prejudice or racism. We have zero. That was boards back that I was involved with, as well as Commissioner Scouten. It would seem to me, just a suggestion, and I understand why your emphasis, but it would seem to me that there's a number of historically disadvantaged groups, and that it might just not be black groups. It could be Latinx, it could be Asian, it could be a number. So to get a broader representation, and you got to do what you got to do as far as your statement, but to get a broader representation, you might consider at least having some reference to other groups as well. It could be part of that movement to have this good dialogue. And I guess my only question is I've been around long enough to know that nobody comes without an ask, and there's going to be an ask at some point. When do you think that might occur?
Yeah, I mean, it can occur right now, right? I mean, you left yourself open.
I know.
But on a serious note, I mean, you know, we're asking folks to give around the same amount, right? So Metro is able to provide 50,000 per year. I think that's super helpful and show some commitment forward. If you all can do more, I think that would be amazing. But yes, at this point, that seems to be a good model, and we're going to be engaging Clackamas and Multnomah in the same exact things. And so, uh, yes, there is an ask, but of course, I also want to continue talking uh, about the needs of Washington County, but this is ultimately for research purposes and having a community-led research process that is in conjunction with a multi-jurisdictional like approach. And so that is basically what the ask is for just basically just like let us do our work, and we'll make sure to come back with something that makes sense for all of us.
So to clarify, we do have a document, a proposal document that enumerates the different aspects of the work to the tune of $2.6 million. So that is in our packet for today. Yeah. So we wanted to recognize that it would be important to come in, have the opportunity to set the stage for how does this fit into all the work that is going on, and to have the opportunity for questions and further reflection as part of our own decision making.
So Catherine, if I could, a couple of things, Lamar. You know, Elizabeth was talking about, you've been talking about the availability of someone else 24/7 other than the three that you mentioned, organizations. I personally think that in my conversations with the sheriff over the last couple of years, I think they would embrace having some mental illness professionals available on a 24/7 basis as well. It would certainly make their job, I won't say it make it easier, but it would be much more of a complete package that you're taking to the scene, where force is certainly not a part of it, does not need to be a part of it, and sometimes actually makes the situation worse because of perceived force. So I completely agree with what you're trying to do there. And like I said, I think that would be welcomed by our public safety organizations. In looking at your $2.6 million proposal, it has $1.6 million of it is to support 10 to 16 Black organizations to create the capacity needed to participate with grants. So is this just a Washington County initiative, or is this a broader initiative? Because I don't know of 10 to 16 Black organizations in Washington County. So could you expand a little bit on where that number came from and what the purpose is?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so those dollars would be used for for different groups or organizations to do outreach, or to have someone that is able to actually help do that research or connecting back with any of the decision makers. And so our like, for example, right, there is a Black Parent Beaverton coalition that exists in Washington County, that they do a lot of work in the Beaverton school district around equity and inclusion. And so that that group could, in theory, like apply to get some dollars to help with doing education, or putting up a forum this is this is just an example, but to help inform like other folks in the community, and get that feedback. And so the purpose of that really is to just like make sure that we are focusing our efforts with people who are actually on the ground and feeling the full impacts of law enforcement one way or another. I will say that this is a statewide effort, in which we'll continue to engage the counties, Metro, TriMet as well, the different cities that are in the kind of like Multnomah, or like the Multnomah County, Washington County, and Clackamas County area, as well as state lawmakers, right? And so we recognize that law enforcement is robust in that it is multi-jurisdictional, in terms of the policies that are set by the state, and then how things are funded on the local level. And so we want to make sure that we are actually working in conjunction with all of those pieces, which is how Reimagine Oregon was kind of, I would say, facilitated, right? Is because we know that that different jurisdictions, or different levels of government have different pieces and responsibilities, and so we'd want to make sure that communication continues. And so that's why you see that there are multiple groups that it could apply to do some of that education or outreach. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much. That was a good overview. I didn't realize, I guess, how big the umbrella was that you're functioning there. So that's great. Thanks for that information.
Yeah, no problem.
I really appreciated that question, Commissioner Willie, because I think it's really useful for us to know if we invest in this program that it will engage members of our community. I've had the opportunity to learn as an elected official, both at Metro and now here at Washington County, that we have to invest in ourselves, meaning we have to invest in our community. We can't just turn to our community members and expect them to have the time, the wherewithal, the energy to gather with other like-minded folks in order to better inform our work. That it's important for us through grants like this to help support, to bring people together. And that's what community engagement grants like the 1.6 million that you've talked about is key. But at the same time, we want to make sure that some of those dollars are used to help engage our community members. And I think that's really important for us to capture and to help ensure as we consider our investment in the Reimagine Safety project or program, that we're able to see how it will help us better understand our community, engage our community, and move forward with you. Thank you.
Scout in here, just a couple of points on the fundraising piece. Since you were involved in a significant way with ASME, can we anticipate there will be labor union contributions as well outside of ASME and the larger labor community, and what we can do to get the private sector, the corporate side to help on this as well? We would all benefit, and potentially, and leveraging would be a very powerful way to ask us to make a contribution, I think.
Yeah, that is the goal, right? We are setting, how we've set this up is actually to leverage dollars from other entities, right? And so that's actually how we engage, how we're engaging my Memorial Trust, right? Is we're trying to set up, of course, like Elizabeth and I were talking about this. If I'm sure you all have done fundraising and have leveraged dollars. Just kind of getting that snowball started, right? So that we could actually start to get some commitments through. We do have commitments already, but yes, labor has been and will continue to be involved in one way or another. I know, just speaking for AFSCME, our international union has definitely looked at what it would take to invest, not just in Oregon, but just like nationally speaking. And so our executive director has been engaging our international union on that as well. And then we'll continue to follow up with the other big unions, but yes, we are the setup of this process is to leverage dollars and to match what what the state and local governments are able to give. And so yeah, I think we're in the same train of thought there.
Yeah, and again, to go back to something we all sort of know, and I alluded to it briefly, um, here in the Portland area, we are in the national spotlight, international spotlight, and national organizations may want to help us out because what happens here could either be something very positive or we could end up becoming a whipping boy or a prop in some very bad political discussions. So I think it's really important that what happens here in this region is progress and something that's positive rather than and we in the Portland area don't normally think of ourselves in that kind of context. We typically think of places like New York or LA, but at this moment in time, we very much are in the national, if not international spotlight. I have family in the Netherlands who are very much aware of what's going on in Portland and ask questions about it.
Thank you, Lamar, for bringing this opportunity forward to us. I do see the timing of this one where we can choose to demonstrate leadership and be an early funder as opposed to followers and coming in later in the game. But it's important that we've had the opportunity to be introduced to this program and for us as a board to engage in the coming weeks. So don't hesitate to reach out to individual commissioners and we'll go from there. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you all, and thank you for the invite. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. So we've had quite a packed morning this morning talking about under the theme of public safety and bringing a lot of activities forward that have gone on over the last 6-8 weeks or so. So we'll take a break now for 15 minutes and then change the topics entirely to other aspects of county work. So we'll see you back here at 5 minutes to 11. Thank you. Protect Coronavirus Relief Fund with Jack Leon.
Good morning, Chair Harrington. Good morning, Commissioners. It's great to see all five of you in person today. And for the record, my name is Jack Leon, Director of Support Services, also Interim Chief Financial Officer. And I am in front of you to provide information on the latest our CARES Act CRF grants and programs. This presentation is primarily focused on the financial aspect of these programs, but I also include some programmatic aspects to it as well. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. So when the CARES Act grants and program were provided to the county stood up a work group, which Chair Harrington and Commissioner Rogers are both on to discuss the allocation of the programs. And we established the four principles. The four principles are the protect public health with $64 million allocated, stabilizing local economy with $26.75 million allocated, support community-based organizations with $5.25 million allocated, mental health and community psyche program with $1 million allocated. And in addition to these four principles, we also reserved $7.5 million in contingency just for any unforeseeable expenditures or any cost overruns in any of these programs. So in the later part of this presentation, I'll go over each one of these principles as well as the programs. So next slide, please. And this is a graphic that we actually created in the county that is published on our website that really illustrates various programs that's under these four principles. And you can see that the total is 104.5 million in total, and that's rounding number, obviously. And then we have programs based on the size. Obviously, the largest one is the Protect Public Health category, which is 54 million in total, with the smallest list part is the $1 million in public mental health and community psyche. So this is on our external facing website. So.
Jack, if I could pause for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So the purple one.
The other programs.
Other programs, that's the contingency one. Then
Correct.
the green one at the bottom is the third theme.
Correct.
The orange one on the bottom left is the fourth theme.
Correct.
So the Protect Public Health is the big green one?
The big green one is a part of the 64 total, and then we have a 7 million, which is the lime yellow, lime green.
Oh, cool, I see
at the
it
top,
there.
that's where the cities and special districts assistance
Yep.
is. And then also 3 million of that utility assistance, which is coming from the Protect Public Health. That makes up the total 64 million.
Oh, cool. Got it. So that means that the two blue ones on the left and the housing, the homeless population one, and then the yellow one, childcare facility support, those all go under local economy. Cool.
Correct.
Good to see all the balloon, so to speak, and how it all comes together.
Thank you. And we try to get to the lower program level of information for the public-facing part. Just we thought that was a little more informative to the public. So, yeah. So next slide, please. And this slide is a general overview of these various programs under CARES Act CRF funding and the spending status of that. The orange bar at the bottom of each bar is what we have spent so far, and the blue bar that's on top is currently that's unspent yet. And this data is based on the end of July, so it's July 31st data, and a lot of more activities has happened in the last 10 days, and I can cover some of those updates in addition to what's presented here. So as we can see that the Protect Public Health category is the largest category, but also at the same time has the largest spending to date with $8.5 million. And then the small business support has $3 million, and then economic recovery has $212,000. I will go into each one of these programs in more detail in the future slides. So this is a general overview slide. Next slide, please. protect public health under the county's COVID-19 response. That is really the county's main effort in terms of this public health emergency. And the total allocation is 54 million. And then as of July 31st, we spent 8.57 million. And I just did a quick check yesterday. The staff did a quick check yesterday. In the last 10 days or so, we spent another $500,000 in that category. So we are actually about 9 million right now. A common question that actually comes up is that out of 54,000, the 8.5 is actually a little bit of a smaller portion of the 54. I think that is all very much due to a slow start in the very first quarter of the responding effort utilizing this particular fund. There were actually a lot of discussion of programs, a lot of discussion of contracts. So starting in July, actually, and August, more significantly, we're seeing more and more contracts going into place. So we're definitely anticipating a ramping up of utilization of this cost. So, but we're definitely keeping a very close monitoring of this and then continue to navigate if we are anticipating to overspend or underspend, and then coming up with a financial plan for these programs. And then various programs are moving from development stage to execution stage in August, so we're definitely anticipating a little more spending in terms of the pace. And obviously that turns into community services into this emergency response. Next slide, please. So for the county's COVID-19 response that has spent so far out of the 8.57 expenditure, this is a quick breakdown of all the categories that it was spent on. We can see the Emergency Operations Center is about 1.6 million, contact tracing is about 1.3 million, respite center 700,000 or so. COVID-19 wellness and leaves program that the county ran is the largest item is with a 3.4 million. That number is slowly ramping down a little bit as we have more and more folks coming back to the workplace, and we don't know what the trend is going to look like into the fall, so we'll keep a close monitor to that. Telecommuting support is close to $500,000, and all the other expenses has a combined 1.1 million so far in cost.
On the wellness and leaves cost, is this for the county employees?
This is for the county employees, yes. Next slide, please. And then for the EOC's effort, the county actually moved a lot of staffing as well as added some new positions to respond to this effort. 291 county employees were reassigned to help EOC in one capacity or another. New limited duration positions, 43 of them were created. The majority of this are under the contact tracing effort. And then we also have 17 volunteers that has participated in the EOC effort. So that's a staffing resource. And next slide, please. Moving on from the county's public health response, so under the public health program, we have the cities and special district assistance program. The total allocation of this portion is $7 million. On July 28th, the Board of County Commissioners approved the 18 IGAs that is distributing this allocation to the cities. And before I come into this presentation, I was still approving contracts that's actually going off. There's a lot of effort that's done by our contract administrators, grant management analysts, and the city partners, special district partners to review these contracts. So while currently there's nothing distributed yet, we're anticipating in the next couple of weeks those funding will get to where they need to be.
Is part of the need for those contracts and the clarity, is that because of the requirements from the CARES Act and from U.S. Treasury to make sure that there's the accountability that Congress wrote into the act?
Absolutely. It's very much so to hold all parties accountable for grant compliance as well as a proper usage of this fund. So the announcement letter has been distributed, IGAs are being reviewed, and I know that Hillsborough's IGA is in contract review. That's at a near finish state. And then I see a couple more other cities contracts that's just coming in today. So a lot of work being done in that area. I see we're already on the next slide. So the total allocation for small business support is $10 million. And the unincorporated Washington County has a $3 million allocation. Incorporated has a $7 million allocation working with the business partners, city partners. So the $3 million, I know that our business assistant work group is working with MISO in particular to distribute that to the needed businesses, and the payments to beneficiaries are in progress. The latest information I have heard, and I know Commissioner Willie and Commissioner Trees are very active on that work group. The latest I have heard is that in the unincorporated, we have a $750,000 that is distributed out to beneficiaries that needs it, and then working on the rest. And the incorporated part, we have a $3.93 million that's out, transferred to Beaverton, Tiger, Cornelius, and Banks, with the rest is still being working through the contract process. Right, next slide. And then the $5 million portion, which is the economic recovery portion, it has a couple different parts. The first part is the $500,000 that's committed to the business recovery program, and of that, the $212,000 has been expended as of July 31st, 2020. The next part is the $2.5 million committed to SBEA, Small Business Emergency Assistance reimbursement to cities, and the contracts are executed, payments are in progress. I think the latest I have heard on the SBEA program is that we have spent 1.9 million of the 2.5 so far out to the cities, and then still working on the rest. The last portion is the $2 million in special programs are currently in progress. The latest information I have is there is a workforce training allocation for $1.5 million that is committed toward that direction, and then the rest, $500,000, is still in discussion and planning stage for that program. Next slide, please. The next slide is also about stabilizing local economy. It's the stable housing and utility assistance. So out of that, we have $6 million for the stable housing assistance and then $3 million for the utility assistance. Now, this $3 million was a part of the Protect Public Health, but then later on, in the program development, we figure out that it actually makes a lot of sense to combine that with the rental assistance program. That's why it's brought to the same program. So it's $6 plus $9 million in total. And no expenditures are made as of July 31st, but the Office of Community Development is leading the program, partnering with multiple community partners, primarily Community Action as a community partner to get those contracts in place and get the service in place. So the contract negotiation and review are currently in progress. All right, next slide. And then the next program is the houseless population support, total allocation with $1.7 million. Currently, there is, we know that there are expenditures incurred, but as of July 31st, there were still no expenditures on the book yet. So a lot of activities that's happening right now. Housing is leading the program development, partnering with various community partners, and contracts developments are in progress. We know that under this program, we have the non-congregate shelter, the Safe Sleep Village, the hotel vouchering program, sanitation of campsites. So there's actually a lot of activities that's happening there with a lot of community partners. I definitely anticipate this number to, as far as spend rate, this number will go up at my next update. All right, next slide. The child care assistance program. The total allocation for this portion is $4 million. No expenditures is made as of July 31st. HHS is the leading program development with the partners from MISO on this contract. Contract development is currently in progress. Other community partners assisting in program development in this effort that includes Community Action, Central Cultural, United Way, and Early Learning Washington County. All right, next program. The Workforce Vocational Coach, it's a smaller dollar amount program, but still very important in the stabilized local economy. There's a total allocation of $50,000 in there. There's no expenditure made as of July 31st. Community Development is also leading the program effort on this, partnering with Work Systems, Inc., and the contract is in review and development stage. Next. Support community-based organizations. There's $5.25 million in here. Again, no expenditure made just of yet. The Office of Community Engagement, Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement is leading the program development with partnership from Oregon Community Foundation. I know that there has been multiple discussions happened with the Oregon Community Foundation, and contract development is currently in progress. Next one. Last but not least, the Mental Health and Community Psyche Program, there's a total allocation of $1 million. There is no expenditure made as of July 31st. A lot of effort of discussion has been ongoing at various levels of our partner jurisdictions. We are working with 3 main convener jurisdictions, that is THPRD, Tigard, and Hillsborough for District 1, 2, 3, and 4. And there has been some discussion about possibly leveraging partner jurisdictions' discretionary funding for this principle and reallocating this fund to protect public health. So we know that THPRD is very agreeable to doing that, and the Hillsborough is seriously considering it. We're in discussion with Tiger on their wish as far as keeping it under this program or using their own discretionary fund. So work is also in progress. Nothing has spent yet, but it's just right on the edge of being spent. So, next slide, please. The last part of this CARES CRF funding is the other program / contingency part. There is $7.5 million still in there. Currently, there is no obvious immediate need for the contingency allocation from the existing programs yet. That's probably because that we're so early in a lot of these programs. We still don't have a trend to monitor yet. And then the total CARES Act CRF funding portfolio is managed and monitored very closely with Support Services Finance, and the ongoing monitoring is definitely in place for this part. Adjustments to any allocation and utilization for the contingency will definitely be brought back to the Board of County Commissioners for approval, if any need is there. So, with that, it's the end of my presentation. Next slide, please. So I want to ask, what are your questions and what additional information can I bring back to the next update?
So commissioners, who wants to go first?
I can. Jack, most of what you were showing us is contracts with others. I mean, we're working through what I would call sub-recipients in essence. What are we doing to follow up with those folks so that we don't find that, one, they either didn't get it all spent by 12/31 on a cash basis, or they had some glitch in their system that we could get the money back and reallocate it to other folks? Are you monitoring that, or tell me that whole process?
Absolutely, thank you. It's a very good question, and that's the precise reason why we stood up a grant management team to specifically address the grant compliance issue with each one of these programs. And there is a grant management analyst assigned to each one of those programs to support our departments in managing these programs. So to answer your question directly, it varies a little bit. For some of these programs that we have a contract in place, it's more of an advance-based type of programs that we get the money out, have them spend it, provide us a report. Versus other programs are more reimbursement basis, where they actually fund the, for example, the city and special district program. The city and special districts has already spent money buying PPEs, upfitting their workplaces, those already using their fund, and we're doing reimbursement. So they will submit their costs along with the receipts to us for us to review and then only provide funding after reimbursement. So in both instances, we're actually reviewing very carefully of what are the things that they spend the money on with proof, subject to the standards that 2 CFR 200, which is the federal's guidance on grant management, to the best to the best standards. So we're actually not only having an internal grant management analyst team that monitors that on an ongoing basis, we also have external grant management consultants that provide advices on the areas where we feel there's some question about. It is obviously a struggle for the Treasury because it's such a new program. They don't have an established guidance out. I think we're working on version 7 or 8 of their frequently asked questions when it comes to clarifications of the guidance. So we're navigating that on an ongoing basis.
Other commissioners?
maybe I should remember this, and maybe we've discussed this before, but what constitutes expenditures? A signed contract to disperse dollars, actual expenditures and receipts? I mean, what is the actual act that has to be done by the end of this year in terms of expenditures?
So based on Treasury's guidance, the expenditure has to be incurred, and that is subject to basically our work when it comes to it comes into a couple different scenarios. For example, if we're contracting with a community-based partner like MISO or Community Actions to operate our programs, so what constitute of expenditures is actually the work being done and the grant being issued or the assistance being provided. So they're acting on our behalf to run the program. So, and they use the word incurred, which is a more or less of a technical finance accounting term, meaning that the work is being done. We don't necessarily have to have cut the check already, but as long as that we owe this money, we have issued this grant, it is considered December 30th as a deadline. So, very great question.
Other commissioners? Okay, seeing none, I'll go. So I have about 4 questions. So if we go to slide 9, the one stabilize local economy, and there are several different programs here, and I really appreciate the diligence that Commissioner Willie and Commissioner Treese are putting in various aspects of these. I have a question from the mayor of the city of Tualatin. So we have programs like the child care program, and while it has $4 million, what staff has worked out in terms of the program is that in order to reach the goal of expanding healthcare supply in these COVID times, the $4 million only goes so far. And they're really focused on home-based childcare for meeting the vast majority of needs for our lower income community members. So that means out of the vast childcare need in our community, we're only able to effectuate one particular segment of that. So the mayor of Tualatin was posing the question of, for that city, of the 7 million, they get are allocated about 600,000. And so they want to make sure that through their city program, that they're able to provide potentially child care grants that don't fall under the home-based child care. And he thought that they had been given the answer of no, they can't do that because we have this other child care program. So can you speak to that?
I think that's a very good question, just because that our $7 million obviously is operating under the Protect Public Health. So on the face of it, we are hoping that the cities can actually use that for their for similar costs, like upfitting their workplace, everything that we're putting under our own Protect Public Health. However, if I don't mean to...
No, this is on the stabilized local economy.
Right. Oh, you're talking
Business
about...
support, slide 9.
Oh, slide 9. Okay, sorry, I'm confused which $7 million.
It's okay, there are different aspects.
That actually is a programmatic question that I do not have the answer for.
I think we can answer that question.
Well, so if we could just follow up with the mayor of Tualatin, or if you know the answer right now, that would be great. I'd like to hear the answer, but I don't need it today. I just wanted to make sure I posed it.
We did not say that they couldn't go to childcare, but remember that the group was setting up the criteria while the childcare group was setting up their criteria. So there was some timing issues there as well.
Yep.
But Jerry and I can ask Alex to get in touch with the city of Tualatin. And the person that's been dealing with the city of Tualatin has really been John Southgate through the economic development people in those cities. So my guess is that he's had conversations with the economic development person that Frank may not be, or Mayor Bubenik may not be as privy to.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Yeah, I think the cities were considering a portion of it to be designated to childcare. So I think everybody's trying to focus on that particular issue.
And there's great need,
Yeah,
absolutely.
there certainly is.
Yeah, so I know that our team here for childcare under HHS has worked on a proposal. They're going through the final steps to help launch that, and they have a write-up that they're going to be sharing with all of us, but they wanted to get those launch details sorted out before they communicated that to us.
Can I just make one quick comment? And that's, when I talked with Frank about that very issue, the question is whether it has to be a private home-based business or whether businesses can offer childcare or childcare incentives for the workers. So you have, let's say you have a low-income worker and you're a small business and you have a need to get your workers back. Can the city grant childcare money so that they can do that, whether they go to a home-based business or not? And then, so it's a little different question than I think.
The answer is yes, the city has
that's
the
good.
option, but
That's
the confusion, I believe, once again, exists in that the child care group has focused, as the chair mentioned, on the home-based piece. So that created a little bit of confusion, but we can clear it up again.
That's good.
So the next question I have is on slide 11. So we know that Community Action has received dollars through state acts different than the CARES Act, really focused at stabilizing housing. They've also received funding through the state, and I think it was brilliant to go and have the utility assistance work as part of that umbrella and what they do. For our stabilized housing aspect of this program, this board gave direction to support rental assistance, but also mortgage assistance. And what I was hearing from mayors yesterday is questions about how this was being effectuated through community action. And I was like, well, wait a second, no. Our Office of Community Development is working out this program and is working with a variety of partners. And so it's not all just going to community action. And what they were struggling with, or the person asking this question was, well, so you've got this program, how will we know where to send people, right? Right now, their answer is just send them to community action. And I said, well, this is where we're still going through for various programs, the launching of these programs. So good question, but this is a first step. So I just kept going back to the information that you have for us today and that you're putting out on our website. The fact that the community, there's so much demand in the community and people are looking for answers. So I just wanted to share that there's that information need on that.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. And as far as the general program overview of all of the CARES Act, we actually do have the Washington County CARES Act grant website stood up that covers all of this. And we do have a specific cover-out right on our homepage. It's still not perfect, but that's actually a good place for community to find information.
It
and partner
improves
into it.
every single week.
Yeah.
So job well done.
Thank you.
The third question is on the CBOs. And I forgot to mark what slide that was for myself. Yes, slide 15. And really, this is just sharing an observation from last night's meeting that we had with the Oregon Health Authority. Because as we've seen in communication from the state has put money into many CBO efforts in order to ensure that the needs of various aspects of our community are being met. And I think it's very important for us to realize that there is accountability with these dollars, and our CBOs, our community-based organization partners, have really tried to ramp up their response to meet community needs. And it's, I mean, if we put ourselves in their shoes, it's more urgent to get food into people's hands. It's more urgent to get healthcare solutions in place and financial assistance than it is to do all the paperwork to follow up on these different dollars that come from different sources. But nonetheless, they do know that there is this accountability piece. So they're struggling a little bit with how do they also make sure they ramp up, just as our own agency has ramped up, to make sure that there are contracts in place to receive the dollars and then to do all the bookkeeping, so to speak, on the expenditure of that. So it's hard. It's a challenging time. Everybody's running so fast. So I just wanted to share that meeting last night really helped galvanize, for me, that problem. Then my last question comes back to the topic that Commissioner Rogers was highlighting. So you all, I think, have done a good job in trying to follow through on the board direction of these 4 different themes, as I call them, and various stepping up various program aspects. Some are already launched and going through, and some are still in the stage of being launched. So here we are on August 10th. We know that these dollars have to be spent by December 30th. You've already answered the question about the expense has to be incurred. So looking ahead between August 10th and sometime before the 30th, do you have a target date? Whether it's something as, as general as, well, early November, just as an example of saying, okay, this is a point where we're going to checkpoint and really do a thorough, what has been our take rate on this? What do we estimate that it will run through all of those? Or is there an additional need for funding that'll have to be addressed through contingency? Or is there money that won't be spent that way so we can reprogram it? Or, gee, we've had the benefit of additional months of learning how to live with COVID and what it takes for economic recovery. So can we put some additional dollars into a new theme? Do we have a date, a targeted date for that yet?
The question is a couple-fold. It's each program has its own designed monitoring technique. For the ones that we are monitoring internally to finance, like the city and special district assistant program, our targeted date is November 15th. So what we're holding for the cities and special districts accountable for is actually utilize this funding up to November 15th for their effort. And most of them, their feedback is that they don't even need that long because they already spent more than
No
they
problem
were
there.
allocated.
Great. So you'll be able to at least estimate it.
Right, so that's kind of our estimated date. But for our internal cost, as well as other programs that do not necessarily have a externally established date, we actually do have we pull the report monthly and look at it monthly just to do our best estimate projection to the end of the December 30th period. So if that's of the board's interest of some kind, we can
So that being
bring that
said,
back.
I will put a stake in the ground that we need to put this topic on our agenda for very early November and take stock of these 3 questions that I just laid out,
We will do that.
so that we can make sure that we are successful in utilizing all these dollars for the betterment of our community.
Is that, I was wondering maybe we should be doing that late October, so we actually have more time to react rather than just a week or two, but, you know.
I'm just trying to, it may
Yeah.
be appropriate, but it leverages off of these monthly reports, right?
Yeah, and I
these
guess
key
my thought
questions.
is that, you know, it's obviously public knowledge that we have $104 million, and I don't think it would be necessarily a good example that we would give back 20 or $30 million to these things. So I want to make sure that we utilize this money very efficiently and effectively, so as soon as we possibly can. And I think that's when I look at your graphs in there about the amount of money that is not yet spent, because we're obviously getting a little bit closer to that date, and it's going to be more difficult. So I would encourage everyone who has access to making those decisions. So let's get this money on the street. A couple of things real quickly is that for at least the business dev group that Pam and I have been working with, and Alex and all the rest of them, we have got a couple of people that you've added to it, Will from Finance and certainly Courtney from Alan's department, that have been phenomenal in helping us work through this process. We could not have done it without them. So I want to certainly give them a shout out and kudos for all the help that they're giving us. And we've been able to move through the IGAs and move through the CARES requirements and all of that because of those two and their knowledge of it. So thank you very much for them. And then John Southgate sent me some information this morning that the state's going to have $10 million to provide for free PPE for the small business as well. Are we going to be able to apply for that, or is our $104 million CARES money exempting us from accessing some of that money from the state?
Well, I may have to bring the answer back to that. I'm not quite sure which portion is John referring to. In the general rule, basically, if the state is allocating their CRF funding, then we are not really eligible as a county that has received direct allocation. I just need to a little more information or research on which part.
Yeah, I'll follow up and ask him if that is CRF money or if it's something else. But and I don't know, maybe Alex knows back there, and he's saying no, he doesn't. So anyway, yeah, we'll follow up on that. But yeah, just to make sure we know where all the little pockets of money are.
Yeah, and our so just as a general practice, our emergency operations center and emergency management is continuously plugged in with the state's emergency coordination center. So I won't be surprised that they already know what this program is, already have a plan on how to coordinate that. Yep.
On the topic of spending the money before it expires, we also need to be looking at the 7.5 in the contingency fund and where the highest and best use of those funds would be as well.
Yeah. So if I may add, I think that this next quarter, as far as our programs being stood up and launched and then starting to go into quote unquote regular operations, is going to be very telling. So I definitely plan to bring basically like a July to September update back to the board sometimes in October, just for your review, and then come up with the next step discussions on fully utilizing this CRF funding.
I think we need to make sure that our need for high-level information is satisfied and that we're successful in effectuating all of these dollars.
Absolutely. That's our goal. So.
Okie dokie. Anything else? No?
All right.
Terrific.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody for following through on all of those program aspects. Okay, we'll now move on to our next topic, the discussion of the Cultural Coalition applicants. Hello, Lisa Tattersall.
All right. I had printer issues, so I'm going to figure this out here. Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Lisa Tattersall. I'm the manager of Washington County Cooperative Library Services, aka WCCLS. Today, I'm here to present applicants for the Cultural Coalition of Washington County, which is currently managed by WCCLS. Can you hear me okay with my mask on? A little fuzzy? Okay, let me do this. Yeah. So I'm here to present applicants for the Cultural Coalition of Washington County, which is currently managed by WCCLS. The Cultural Coalition's main purpose is to administer state funds directed to Washington County from the Oregon Cultural Trust. The Cultural Coalition distributes these funds from the Cultural Trust through a competitive grant process to Washington County-based arts, heritage, and humanities organizations. The current Cultural Coalition bylaws call for between 9 and 15 members who reside in Washington County or are members of a business or organization significantly involved in arts, heritage, or humanities activities in Washington County. Quorum is defined as a majority of coalition membership. The coalition has 6 current members. Staff are recommending that we fill an additional 5 vacancies for a total of 11 members. Adding 5 new members creates an odd number on the coalition. It allows for a workable balance between experienced and new committee members, and it also fulfills the requirements of the bylaws. Staff plan to return to the Board of Commissioners in about 6 months to discuss the future of the Cultural Coalition and to get your direction. The main question is, should the Cultural Coalition continue to be managed by WCCLS or by an arts nonprofit in Washington County? If the coalition moves to being managed by a local nonprofit, this will have an impact on governance and your role in the coalition's purpose and function. So we'll return in about 6 months with some recommendations for your consideration. For this work session, I'll share the 5 applicants being recommended for the Cultural Coalition. Current Cultural Coalition members express a commitment to diversify their membership and to increase their collective understanding of applying equity principles in grants. In addition to choosing which applicants to award grants to, individual coalition members support grantees through the process of delivering their grant project as well as reporting on the grant. Continuing to grow the diversity and collective skills of the coalition membership will benefit the local arts community in the county. After interviewing each applicant and their references, we think that these 5 applicants will do an excellent job in helping the coalition to continue to meet these goals. Teresa Payne works in Tualatin and lives in Beaverton. She is an active community leader in the city's diversity, equity, and inclusion work. That's the city of Beaverton. By joining the Cultural Coalition, Ms. Payne says she wants to contribute to bringing cultures together in Washington County. Balin Yunus of Beaverton is a relatively recent immigrant to the United States from Iraq and is currently a case manager working with new immigrants while completing his MBA. Mr. Yunus is part of the Kurdish community and expressed an interest in being an ambassador for the Cultural Coalition granting program in the immigrant community. Andrea Tichy lives in District 3, and she is currently the Director of Marketing and Audience Development for the Portland Opera. Ms. Tichy's skill set in communications and arts administration will be invaluable to support cultural organizations dealing with the impact of COVID on their operations. Ramesh Krishnamurthy lives in District 4 and is a retired Intel engineer. He brings a strong management skill set to his passion for the arts. Mr. Krishnamurthy founded a cultural education organization in the county which teaches music and dance from the traditions of South India. By participating in the CCWC, he hopes to support arts organizations with financial and logistical support. Lastly, Marilyn Hayes of District 4 manages cross-cultural relocations for corporate and government clients. In addition, she does advocacy work to increase access to the arts and culture in schools. Ms. Hayes would bring a strong understanding of project management, the dynamics of cross-cultural communication, and a passion for the arts to the Cultural Coalition. I realized that in this version of the document, I did not indicate that we had how many total applicants we had, so I just want to mention that real quick. My apologies. We had a total of 5 plus, let me do math real quick. So we had 9 applicants. We had 2 more, but they withdrew. So we're recommending 5 of those 9. We had a great pool. Do you have any questions?
Commissioners, any questions? I have a couple of thoughts, since there are no other questions. In reviewing the 5 recommended applicants, I thought there was every reason to appoint those 5. The process that I'm used to with all of our applications is that we are provided with all the applicants. And so I raised a flag the other day that
Yes.
just didn't provide that. So I don't know if it ever got fixed.
Oh.
Nobody ever got back to me, so.
I'm so sorry. Yes, I thought it was going to you yesterday.
Oh,
But
well.
I'm sorry I didn't make it.
It's okay.
Okay.
I had in looking at these 5, I was like, oh, those are compelling, I get that. The other thing I wanted to contribute is, given the key questions, and I'm familiar with these as key questions from our conversation last summer, and I look forward to our having the opportunity to engage on that in the future. But it may take beyond December to resolve some of these things. And given the mix of folks on the commission thus far, if Mari Watanabe would like to continue to see this through for another year, I think it would be beneficial if she's open to it for us to extend her tenure for another year. And I figured now would be the time to bring that up so we could just do it all in one fell swoop. So that's what I wanted to raise.
Thank you. We will definitely ask her.
Anything else? Okay.
Thanks for your time. So these appointments will be coming back to you on your agenda on August 25th.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And sorry that updated packet didn't get to you.
That's okay. These were all, the packet was available, but I was just waiting to find out, and I didn't go back to see.
Were you looking at for the applications of the individuals that weren't recommended?
Yep.
And they are in there now.
Yep.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thanks for your time.
All righty. So the next item on our agenda before lunch is an executive session. So we'll need a motion on this, but then everybody else who's not involved with this executive session will need to leave the room. So do we have a motion to proceed in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660 sub 2 sub H?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously, 5-0. So, thank you, Alan. Do we continued, but the audio turned off? But the streaming audio to the rest of the building needs to be off.